both of them sought a home rule petition. The theater building was last May's town meeting. Mr. Chan's was, I think, even the October before that. They took some time going through the legislature. Neither one of them has yet submitted an application to this board. So that should give people a sense of what the timing here is, that it's a year or more in order to, between the time the warrant article gets submitted, we go through the town meeting process, the state legislature, assuming the town meeting approves it, it's a long period of time. So people should just be aware of that because there has been some confusion out there.
And I think that's healthy because I think that will give the community time to evaluate the new menu, the new chef, the new operation, and how they feel towards it.
So the warrant committee took a vote on this last night. They're in a little bit of a different situation. They have to go to print at the end of the month, and they could recommend in favor, they could recommend against, or they could just say, we're not ready to make a recommendation yet, we'll make one in May. There's really nothing requiring us to vote on this tonight, and my recommendation, I think, to the board as the chair would be that we let Suzanne and Bob start having some of these discussions with the neighbors, seeing if there can be some kind of consensus built up on some of the issues, and hopefully the neighborhood meetings will be productive and will produce some good agreement on some of these issues. There's nothing requiring us to vote tonight. We could take a vote if a member wanted to make a motion, but it's also possible just to take this under advisement and hear further as we go along through the next couple of months where you're at and how things are going. But I'd be happy to hear what both of you think about that.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm always happy to see increased commerce in the business district, and this is certainly, that, and to that extent, I'm clearly in favor of anything that makes the business district more vibrant and better experience. So it will do that.
It's our article, so again, it's not a citizen article. It's a selectmen's article. So at some point, this is one of the later ones at town meeting, so it'll probably be the last night of town meeting when this comes up. So at some point, we'll have to take a vote on whether we support, an article that we submitted. But I think we have a couple of months to make that decision.
I think that's true, and I think when town meeting comes, we have 44 articles before it to decide, and this will become Article 45, I believe. Although it's an important one, everything at town meeting is important, and I think most of the time town meeting comes to the right conclusion. I hope it does here.
Okay, well, thank you both for being here tonight. Does anyone from the board have any other comments or questions? Anything else that either of you would like to add?
I'd just like to reiterate the fact that there has been a restaurant here for the past 20-something years. The seating is actually going to be reduced, so the number of cars coming in and going out will probably be, if anything, less. Okay, the other thing is, if and when there is a bar, there's not going to be a sit-down bar. There's not going to be people coming in to use it as a bar facility. And the final thing is, knowing Suzanne as I have for the last 3+ years, she is picky and she is very conscientious. She's not going to go into this until she has it down right. And I think that the people of Milton are going to be very, very pleased with what they see.
Even the neighborhood representative last night said that they're looking forward to the restaurant opening. The issue here is the liquor license. It's not the breakfast or the lunch menu, and they're all looking forward to that, according to him. So I think we're all looking forward to the restaurant opening. And
excellent, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a good introduction. There's a lot, believe it or not, there's a lot of people who watch these meetings. So I think the word will, between the warrant committee meeting last night and this meeting tonight, the word will start getting out. And we wish you lots of success with a lot of the meetings you're having and the discussions.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Suzanne.
I'll wait.
Okay, let's take a minute or two for the room to just, I know there's a lot of people here who are going to leave, and we have some other people in the hall waiting to come in, so we'll take a moment before we move on to the next item on our agenda.
Good.
Is the town accountant? She's coming? Okay. I know. Yeah, we've got an overflow crowd tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being here. A lot of representation from East Milton tonight.
Very good, right?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Should have Peter to wash it down with.
Now look at these.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. In a moment, we're going to be joined by our town accountant, Amy Dexter. Here she is. Amy, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Amy.
And we're going to talk about the capital budget. Now, depending on where this discussion goes, let me just mention, when we met at a previous meeting to approve the initial recommendation of the capital committee, we voted a bottom line budget. And we've got a couple of different proposed motions. This is an increase on the bonded side.
Yes.
Does the board, Tom and Amy are the co-chairs of the capital committee. Are you planning on having a discussion about this? Because if you are, I'm probably going to be recused since it's just bonded. We don't have non-bonded in this particular item tonight.
I don't think this is going to be any big discussion. I mean, I wasn't planning on one.
No, I wasn't either, unless you
Okay,
guys
we have the
had
written
questions.
information. Do you want to have a discussion on this?
I just
Dennis?
had a quick question. Who came up with the $200,000 number, Tom?
That was coming from Joe and from Joe Lynch and from
Trace.
Trace. That's what the makeup money they needed to do the two separate buildings.
Right. So one is the DPW locker room, and the other is the cemetery garage.
Yep.
But
Just
just,
but they're both break rooms, aren't they?
One's a garage.
Oh, it's a garage. Okay. Yep.
yeah.
So,
But they physically got estimates from contractors? Or is it
Yes.
just from
Trace
experience?
has
they-
a hard estimate, I think, and
Trace has bids in hand.
yeah.
Joe isn't at that stage yet. The initial appropriation back a couple, I don't remember the date, wasn't enough for them to do both projects. So this is supplemental to get them to a total of, that they need to do both of those projects.
Right. Well, I've been in the DPW locker room. It's
Pretty disgusting.
disgusting. Really needs to be done.
So
Remind me, where's this money coming from?
Well, that's a discussion for, at this point, it would be recommended for bonding. There may be another way to do it, but I think we'll have to discuss that.
So we're going to we're going to approve this money, but we don't know where the money is coming from yet. Is that correct?
We're approving the
No.
capital project.
yeah, so we have, it's classified in the capital committee's request as under the bonded items. We have two categories. We have bonded and non-bonded. It's been put into the bonded.
Right.
So I was going to propose that we vote a new total because we voted a bottom line budget for this the last time.
That's fine.
But if you want to have a separate vote on the bonded, I'm going to step out of the room.
I don't think it's.
I don't
mean,
think it's
necessary.
necessary.
We're approving the capital projects. I mean, you know, even though it goes in what we call quote-unquote a bonding article, that doesn't necessarily mean those projects are bonded. There could be grants that fund them. There could be a lot of things other than floating a bond issue that pays for those projects.
Okay, so the accountant has given us a revised bottom line number of $1,859,780, which is $200,000 more than the amount we voted, I think, 2 meetings ago.
What's the number again, Katie? 1 million?
$1,859,780. So do we have a
We
motion?
need a new motion for that?
Yes.
So I'll move to approve a recommendation of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee in the amount of $1,859,780 for FY16 for the.
I think you can just stop the motion there because that's the total, because the rest of
Okay,
this is the.
in total, okay.
Yeah.
Which includes the 200,000.
Second.
Okay, then any discussion on the motion?
Also.
Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
For
Amy.
waiting tonight. All right, we're going to recess the Board of Selectmen's meeting. We have members of our Historical Commission who are here, so we're going to convene a meeting of the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Fund. We will return to the Selectmen's meeting once we complete our meeting with the Historical Commission. So we have several members here from the Historical Commission. If they'd like to join us, hopefully we didn't send all the chairs away. Please feel free to bring a chair up to the table. No.
Yeah, good.
No, this is open session. And we have some refreshments still at the table here, so
Great, plenty of them,
please
and they're good.
pass them around the audience, and anyone who'd like to, I think one box has made it around the audience, maybe we'll send another one
That's not
around.
bribery, is it?
Sorry?
That's not bribery, is it?
We needed a
That's
beer to
why
go
we're
with it,
sending
though,
it to
that's
the
the problem.
audience, Steve. So,
Good evening.
good evening.
I'm Steve O'Donnell, Chairman of the Historical Commission, and with me tonight is Meredith Hall, Linda Weld, and Wally Sisson.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for waiting out in the hall tonight, many of you, standing out there for about an hour.
Thank you for giving us some time tonight. We know that this whole town farm situation is ongoing, hopefully approaching a conclusion. But we also feel it's not too early to begin thinking about what happens when this process is concluded. We feel very strongly that the trustees should retain the 4 acres and the buildings thereon, and hopefully also the pest house might come back on the property. The site walk last year showed us that even though the buildings had been unused and essentially derelict for 10 or more years, they are sound, they can be rehabilitated, renovated, and used for housing. The 4 acres might also present the opportunity to build additional units. It's a little premature for that. We expect that the trustees don't want to be in the real estate business.
Too late.
They don't want to be, well, notwithstanding. They don't want to be contractors. They don't want to be rental housing managers. Yet, they would like to keep control, we hope, over the property in order to be sure that it is preserved as it should be. There are a number of options for redevelopment of the property which would not burden the trustees, but which would give them the opportunity to control what goes on with the property. And that's what we wanted to discuss a little bit with you tonight. Linda?
I have to go back a few months. I think it was last spring that we had Sally Zimmerman and a colleague of hers from Historic New England come to visit us about the Eustis Estate. And it just so happened that I'd been reading their newsletter and saw one of their articles about their stewardship program. So since they were there, I said I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you're here and ask you about some questions about this. And I said, did you know that Milton has this town farm property? And they were right on top of that. They said, of course we know all about that. I was sure, knew more than I did, and they said, we'd love to help you with the town farm if it ever gets to that point. So I just sort of kept that in the back of my mind, and then a little later we had the site walk. And then last fall, I'm an architect, and the Boston Society of Architects Historic Resources Committee had a meeting that was focused on the Milton Town Farm, and I thought, this is really interesting, and maybe it's a meeting that I should go to, even though it's 8 o'clock in the morning in downtown Boston, I'm supposed to be someplace else completely. Because I thought, well, I can only learn something about this from a number of architects who are experienced in historic preservation, have experience with rehabbing properties. So I went basically as a spectator to learn some more about Milton's Town Farm and about possibilities for preservation or rehabbing buildings. And in fact, I really did learn a lot. There was a fellow, I think his name was Dave Kellner, Kelman, who's a realtor in Boston, who made the presentation. He did a very poor job. It was really quite embarrassing about how much he didn't know about the town farm and what the status of the project was. So I was sitting in the back over there somewhere and said, if any of you have ideas that could help us advance the discussion about what's happening with the town farm, get in touch with me. And in fact, a half a dozen people followed me out of the meeting and gave me cards and said, call me, call me, call me. This is exactly the kind of project that I have experience with. And so I did call a number of people. And the starting point, I think, is to consider the notion that these properties are ripe for listing on the National Historic Register, and that does not preclude doing things with them. And I think Edie Clifford, who attends our meetings, has often said, when we ask her, so if it's on the Historic Register, what does that mean? And she said, not much really, in terms of what you can do with the buildings. So along with Wally, I started doing a little bit of looking into what listing the buildings on the Historic Register might mean. And Wally started out with copying some of the things that are available online, but I made copies out of things that, just because I think it's a good starting point to think about how the listing on the National Historic Register might be important for these buildings. And what I learned from other members of the Historic Resources Committee was that, in fact, listing the buildings enhances their value.
Well, the first thing is my historic rehab credits.
Exactly so, exactly so. So the contractors look at the buildings and say, wow, if I do this, this, and this, it helps my bottom line. I can actually make the buildings
It
usable.
has to be commercial in nature, so it had to be the rental or
Right, it has to be, yeah, it can't be owner-occupied,
Right.
basically. But there isn't necessarily a bottom line that says, you can never change anything in this building because it's a historic building. And the other part of that is our discussion with Historic New England, Sally Zimmerman and her colleague, who said, we'd love to help you think about easements that would let us think about what's important to preserve and what can go away. Obviously, the buildings have been used for years and years and years, so things have been changed to make them usable. So maybe that kitchen or bathroom has no historic value, and Historic New England is saying, so, that's not something that you're going to want to preserve anyway. So that's where we can help you decide what's worth putting an easement on and what's not worth putting an easement on. So I think the two pieces of Historic New England being able to help us think about what easements might enhance the value of the property in the eyes of a developer, and the notion that it doesn't have to, it actually has the opposite effect of enhancing the value of the properties to put them on the National Historic Register, might be a starting point. And if you guys are interested at all, I'd love to get some more people who are experienced with doing this kind of work, or even the people from Historic New England who are going to be in town more and more with the Eustis Estate, help us think through what some of the possibilities might be for the future.
Are you sure these buildings would qualify?
As I understand it from what Edie said, is that Mass Historical Commission thinks they do.
And once they get on either the Mass or the Federal Register, then they're eligible for the historic rehab credit.
And grants.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and
grants.
grants,
You're
that's right, that's very important as well.
If you do, and obviously that credit is a huge credit. So not only do you, as a business owner of the building, get to depreciate the building 100%, but you also get a credit, money back in your pocket, equal to, I think it's about 80% of the rehab costs of the building.
I don't think it's 80%.
It's a pretty high percentage.
Well, you've got some of the information there, and I think that this is just a starting point of what the real possibilities are.
The question is...
As I found out from going to this meeting, people were following me out of the door saying, I've done this, here's my card, call me, and let's talk about what the possibilities are. So there are lots of people with experience and expertise that I don't have, but would love to get involved and have them come and talk to you and get real experience and real numbers about what the possibilities are for using the buildings, and also conserving their presence in the town. I get more and more worried the longer I am on the committee, and I'm the newest member. No, I'm not. I'm sorry, Ted is.
Ted is.
But I'm pretty new, and it's sad to watch how many historic buildings Milton is losing, because it's up to the owner to make the move to list it as a historic building. In this case, you guys, the trustees, are the owners.
So these buildings are not on any register right now?
No, but they're eligible. According to what Edie Clifford tells us, Massachusetts Historical Commission thinks they're eligible.
They're listed with the Massachusetts Historical Commission.
Well, that's what I meant. So they are on some
Massachusetts,
register.
but not federal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the town farm is a historic site as far
Are
as...
they on your registered, the Milton? Okay, so Milton and Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, yeah.
And the next one would be federal?
Federal.
Yeah. And that's actually, interestingly enough, a function of the National Park Service. So, the possibility of thinking about how the National Park Service interprets these sites or thinks about these sites, it's really, really interesting for the town of Milton, I think. But the sad thing being on the Historical Commission is watching the buildings that we're losing, where we really only have the demolition delay power. But you guys are the owners. So this is a different situation. We can't necessarily say to somebody whose house is historic, don't touch the exterior, don't touch this, don't touch that. They'll just say, not interested. But it's up to the owners to take this action. And I think in the eyes of many people whose communities have historic buildings, it really does enhance the value of other properties in the communities. And I think Milton can't afford to lose more historic buildings.
When were they built, do you know? Does anybody know?
End of the 19th century,
Right.
post-Civil War, but maybe some as one of the buildings or so is later 19th century. But in that probably in the last quarter of the 19th century.
The pest house is probably the oldest.
Is that
It's been altered significantly, but it's one of the oldest.
One of the comments that you made, Mr. Kahane, at a meeting we were at a couple of weeks ago was sometimes a developer or an owner can make more money by
donating?
donating. Well, this isn't exactly donating, but a small contractor may be able to make more money by using the tax credits than he can by renovating and renting or even selling. And we'll throw out the idea that the developer of the rest of the property in the town farm is not going to pay any attention to a tax credit. It's too small for a big organization like Pulte. A small contractor would benefit greatly. A large contractor wouldn't want to be bothered. We've also seen situations where contractors go into a historic building and they say they're going to renovate it, and then once they own it and get in there, oh, well, it's really too difficult, it's too expensive, we can't do it. So that's why we feel it's very important not only to retain the 4 acres, but to retain the buildings thereon.
By getting a federal designation.
Well, this is one way to do it.
But if you did get a federal designation, does that eliminate the 9-month demolition delay?
Well, the town is exempt from the town is exempt, and I suspect the trustees would be
We'll say
exempt.
if the land had to be sold, and what they were designated as federal
I think they
landmarks.
would not. It would not change the demolition delay
I don't know, but.
So you still have the right to demolish after?
after 9
Yes,
months.
it would, unless we imposed some restrictions on it. And nobody is going to impose any restrictions.
Right.
I mean, historic New England, if they came in with a preservation easement, the trustees could do that. But there's a number of different layers here, there's a number of different angles, and that's why we wanted to kind of throw it out early, so that as you're doing your thinking along the way, edging hopefully towards a conclusion on the majority of the property, all right, what's going to happen with the rest of it? Are we going to be stuck with this thing and we have to maintain it? No, not necessarily, but you can still ensure its preservation.
Are there any state grants, like being on the Massachusetts Historical Register?
I don't know.
There are
probably some.
actually, I was involved with the Forbes House Museum for a number of years, and I wrote a grant proposal. It's Mass Historic Preservation Projects Fund, and they fund different levels. For the Forbes House Museum, we were looking at using the barn and carriage house, and all we applied for in grant money was a feasibility study from an architect to look at using the carriage house for programs, how much would it cost, and then I sort of stepped it back to say, well, if we put that much money into the carriage house and barn, how many events would we have to have over years to pay for that?
Many of those grants are matching grants, too, I know that.
Right. Before I was even going to put my time into writing the grant, I said all of the trustees have to commit to putting in, I think it was $15,000 because then we would get another $15,000 from Mass Historic Preservation Project Fund. But that was just for a feasibility study. They
Right.
do have other grants, but you're absolutely right, it's
A lot of
matching
them are.
funds.
And
It's
that's where,
matching
that's where
funds.
community preservation comes in
Yeah,
handy. That's your
yeah.
match. But-
Yeah. But I'd love to, I mean, it was just such a wonderful eye-opener to have all these people say, I've done this, here are some ideas, I'd love to come in and talk to you guys about my experience in working on this kind of a project. But it really does take the commitment to looking in more deeply into what's involved, because I think right up front, the notion usually is, oh gee, these preservation easements or even listing on a register means I can't do anything with my house or my, whatever the building happens to be. And I remember a number of years ago talking to Edie Clifford and asking her, so what does that really mean? And she said, not a lot. And if you look at this little handout, it really puts most of the decision-making in the hands of the people who are at the community level or the state level and not the national level. But the national register means that then you can go ahead with the tax, what's the word?
Credits.
The tax credits and also grants. So the encouraging part is Historic New England saying, we'd love to work with you on the poor farm. And now that they're in town, I think we should take advantage of them.
I think they could be a good resource here.
They're a
Yes, they're a
terrific
terrific
resource.
resource.
They're a terrific resource. And I think of anything that's happened in the past few years, as I watch these buildings fall, I keep thinking, yes, now Historic New England is going to be the real catalyst for getting people interested in the fact that there's not just one building in town, but there's the Forbes House Museum and there's the Swift Hat Shop, and we'll finally get some critical mass, and it will enhance the community.
I think the board does want to work with you and your other colleagues on the Historical Commission on some of these projects, and you just mentioned the Swift Hat Shop, and Linda's one of our appointees for the Swift Hat Shop later tonight, so we're glad to see some movement there, and Steve has been very helpful in getting us some people to serve on this new committee. You know that we're still under due diligence period with Pulte,
Oh, yes,
so
yeah.
until that really plays itself out, there's probably nothing immediately that we can do, but we can certainly be thinking about it and talking with you a little more about some of these ideas.
Right, and that's kind of, I am only hearing through the commission what's going on with Pulte, but I did want to take the opportunity to let you know that there's experience, and in fact, if there's more knowledge about what other possibilities are, let's get talking about it so that you have that at least in the general picture of possibilities of things that could happen.
I mean, I'd clearly love to figure out a way to save the buildings.
Yes, I think we all would.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
I
that
agree.
goes without saying. I mean, we have a lot of hurdles that we'd have to overcome in terms of, what is the use, we probably have to go back again to the Attorney General, assuming that the use was not for the poor of Milton. I mean, the use could be that, if you could find a developer that would
Sure.
do it, but probably unlikely. Probably unlikely that you're going to get 100%, affordable housing restricted to Milton residents only, even if it did have a historic rehab credit with it. You could have a historic rehab credit along with the low-income housing tax credit on there. Then you've got all kinds of money for a developer. But again, it's what the neighborhood. So you got neighborhood issues because if it's going to be a rehab credit, then it can't be home ownership. It's either going to be rental housing or it's going to be commercial. That's all you can do to entice a developer with a rehab credit. Then you've got the AG problem, and we got the Pulte problem. So we got a lot of problems to overcome.
We do, but on that note, the town planning director is here, and Bill, could you come up to one of the microphones so that they can hear you on TV? But Bill can give us just probably a brief update of someone who's gone out to look at the buildings at the suggestion of our former town administrator, John Cronin. Bill.
Now you got to repeat what you just said.
Could you just give us an update on Mr. Cronin's suggestion of sending somebody out to look at it and where we're at with that?
we found 2 architects from town to take and go out and look at it. The architects went out, came up with some suggestions. Bill Ritchie and I went out, the Director of Consolidated Facilities went out, looked at the buildings, toured the buildings with the 2 architects. They came back and asked for floor plans of the buildings, which we did not have. We actually used the interns that we have down at DPW in the engineering department to come up with floor plans. I shipped the floor plans out to the 2 architects. I got back one set of plans from one of them, and we haven't gotten in touch with the second one yet. They were preliminary plans. There were some ideas. How many units could you get in the main house? How many units can you put in the other house? They were the only 2 buildings that we looked at. The barn itself, we've pretty much written off as it's not, you can't save it. It would cost you more to repair it than it is to save it. It's not built, it's not post and beam built, it's stick built, so it doesn't have any real, the outside image of the building may look historic, but the inside construction is not. It is several additions added to it over time. Some of those same additions have been removed over time. The sills are gone, the ridgepole is gone, the interior supports are gone. It's got serious water damage. Literally, the only thing holding it up are those 2x6s that are propping up the outside walls. The weight of the roof is going to make it implode. I'm shocked that it didn't happen this winter, except that it has a slate roof, and the slate roof usually sheds versus keeping the snow on the roof. The pest house, we didn't look at it at all. Mr. Fitzgerald lives there, so we didn't actually go near it. We just concentrated on the 2 main houses.
And for those of us who were on the tour last spring, which includes many of the historical folks, they're pretty big. There's quite a lot of rooms, especially in the main Alms house. It's a lot bigger than one would think.
Yes.
So you're waiting to hear back from the second architect?
We are. Then we'll get them together and have a...
That might give us a preliminary idea of what some potential restoration ideas are.
Which way we want to
Reuse.
think about having them work.
Thank you, Bill.
Wally, anything else? Thank you very much. Food for thought, if nothing else, because you have
That's
nothing
great.
else to think about, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But going
absolutely.
forward, these are opportunities that it might be worth pursuing.
I think we all look forward to working with you,
Thanks, Meredith.
you and the commission on this, when we get to the right
When we get there.
time. But this is a good time to start thinking about these things. So we're glad you brought it up. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all. All right, so we'll adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Governor
So
Stoughton
moved.
trustees?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we're back to our recessed Board of Selectmen meeting. The next item on that agenda is a discussion of the town administrator warrant article. Okay, we have 2 revisions. Town councils. Right, so we,
2 revisions since yesterday? Or?
no, well, one since yesterday. Town council sent over some comments right before the meeting started tonight.
Is this it? Okay.
No, so that one, Dennis, I think is, if that's town council's, there's an earlier draft that should be in the materials, or I know Paula emailed them to the board.
So these are not the ones that were, which one's which?
All right, then the one in, if you click on the package, the first set should be there. I can at least just review them. These are really the government
Yeah,
study committee's
312.
changes.
Yeah.
Okay, but the 3.9, the draft mark 3.9 is the government studies earlier comments. And these came up at our meeting. We were all at the warrant, we were at the warrant committee meeting with members of the government study committee on Monday evening. And just briefly, the comments, one was from town council, which was to add in some notwithstanding any general or special law in section 2, which is already in section 1. But the comments that came from the government study committee were in section 2P. We had some talk before about the procurement officer, and the suggestion here from government study is to have the town administrator appoint the chief procurement officer. And that, it could be the town administrator appointing herself or himself, but until we figure out who really should be the right person to be the procurement officer, the appointment power rather than serving as the procurement officer is what they thought would be better.
Yeah.
The sentence after 2W has some changes that were made Monday night, and it's really a wording change. This is, the government study committee wanted to take the sentence out because they thought the town administrator shouldn't be able to delegate duties to department heads or other employees because they want the town administrator. Now that we're transferring all of this power to the town administrator, keep the town administrator accountable for it. Our board at previous meetings has said we think that delegation power is essential to do the job. So I think the wording change makes sense, and the way they prefer to word it is to say the town administrator may delegate duties to any subordinate officer or employee to aid the town administrator in the performance of his or her duties and responsibilities. It takes out language saying exercise any power on the theory that that could include a power of appointment. So it's really meant to try to serve our purpose and address their concern at the same time. The recommendation to delete Section 3, Section 3 was added, I think not added, it was in the initial draft from the Government Study Committee, and it would have, it says the Board of Selectmen and town meeting may, by amending the bylaws, delegate licensing authority other than things like liquor licenses, in-holder licenses, common vic licenses, and food vendors. We could delegate other licensing authority to the town administrator. Our question at a previous meeting had been, well, what licenses are contemplated? And the Government Study Committee is recommending that that section just be deleted. They also wanted, in Section 5, we have a provision in here for the appointment of an interim town administrator, and their concern was not for a long period interim administrator, but what if the town administrator has an illness or is incapacitated for a shorter period of time? They wanted to add in the appointment, some provision for the appointment of a temporary town administrator, because one question that they had was, would the powers revert from the town administrator to the Board of Selectmen at that point if the town administrator is incapacitated? And the answer from town council is that it would not, and we just need to draft a provision to include that, to provide for the board to make an appointment. So the second version is the changes that came over from town council just before we met tonight.
So one question on, since you were talking about Section 5.
Okay.
Right now, Section 5 has a not longer than 12-month period to it?
All right, so this is town council. I haven't even looked at this yet. This is town council's draft, so we need to work through it as we go. So if you want to go, do you want to go to that section
Is this
first?
the draft now that we got today? That's his draft, right?
Yes. Town council's is the one that takes, if you look at the first page, that takes the notwithstanding language out of the first paragraph and into the second paragraph of Section 2, just so we're all in the same.
Okay.
Okay, so Section 5, John has added a subsection. I'll just read it. In the event of a temporary absence of the town administrator for a period of not less than 14 consecutive days, the Board of Selectmen may appoint in writing a qualified town officer or employee to serve as the acting town administrator. The acting town administrator shall exercise the powers and perform the duties of the town administrator until such time as the Board of Selectmen revokes in writing such appointment as acting town administrator.
What about compensation?
I don't think compensation is addressed anywhere in here. This is really just the setting forth the powers and duties,
Right.
whereas compensation would be bargained in an employment contract.
No, I get it, but if you take a regular employee and make them the interim town administrator, you could be doubling their salary, like it's...
Yeah, but I think that would get negotiated, or the board, because if this becomes legislation, this, unless it's changed at some future time, could be in existence for decades, so compensation will vary over time. So that's not going to be set forth in the legislation, but it would be set by a board that's making that appointment.
I guess my question is that 12 months, does that make the 12 months hard and fast? And what happens if you run into that rare circumstance where you need more than 12 months, is there any provision to
Extended?
extend it beyond that?
Well, all right, so that's a different issue. So that's the interim town administrator. And when that, I think you raised that before, Tom, at a meeting.
Yep.
And the government study committee's view was, well, if it takes more than 12 months, then just appoint somebody
interim.
for 12 months and then appoint somebody again for another interim period. It's different than the short-term absence, but
Okay, was the interim talked about?
the first paragraph of Section 5 is the interim. The second paragraph is the acting town administrator for a short-term vacancy.
Vacancy of town administrator. Town administrator, serve. What am I reading wrong? I'm reading Section 5. In the event of a vacancy in the position of town administrator, the board shall appoint an interim town administrator to serve until such time as the next town administrator is appointed, but not for a period of longer than 12 months.
Yep.
So what do we do if you don't have
You have
a...
to make another appointment then. Or you hire the interim to be the, under a 1 or a 2-year contract. It's a different issue than the one that John was asked to address in terms of the short-term vacancy.
Okay.
So if, we could go back on that if we needed to, but the government study committee's view was that
So
if it takes more than 12 months to replace a town administrator, we should be entering into a short-term or a 1-year employment contract. I mean, I understand your point.
Yeah,
It could
I'm
be that
just trying to think
somebody
about it for a second.
is
Yeah.
interviewed and offered the job and then doesn't take it, and then you wind up
You
going
back
back
out.
out. It could be more than 12 months.
Right, exactly.
Can we go back to Section 2B and C?
Yes.
So Section B allows the town administrator to hire department heads, police chief, fire chief,
Yes.
and then within 15 days it becomes effective. The
Right.
Board of Selectmen will be notified,
Yes.
and if we don't like the appointment, we can basically make it null and void.
Yes.
But if you go to Section C, the town administrator has the authority to suspend or remove any person. I'm assuming remove means fire somebody.
Yes.
Okay. And the only person that he, in this case, she, would have to consult is the chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
When it's not even consult, the government study committee changed that word from consult to inform. So because there was confusion on their, not confusion, there was concern on their board that consult was a vague term, and what does it really mean? And I think one of you two maybe made that same comment at a meeting. So it's been changed to just inform the chair of the board, whoever's the current chair of the board. So the board doesn't have any right to say that that person should not be fired. It would be
But
the
the board-
town,
Right, the
it's
board
the
does
town
have the-
administrators.
Right, but the board has the right to say if somebody can be hired.
Well, it has the right to veto.
Has a veto power.
Right.
Yeah,
Same thing.
and you would hope you'd use that veto power very discriminatively. But, yeah,
See, personally, I don't like that because, Anne Marie is here now, God knows who the next town administrator will be, and, you take a Board of Selectmen in 5 or 6 years' time, we don't know who they're going to be. If you get the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator together, they can just get rid of any chief.
But the chairman doesn't have the right to do it. It's
No,
just
he's
the town
going,
administrator.
it's going to be informed.
Yeah, and so I guess the theory then would be that if it's a 5-member board, then maybe the chair, well, I guess in either case, the chair could inform the other two that this decision has been taken, or the town administrator would eventually inform them. I think the reason that this government study committee came up with the chair was that under a circumstance where you might want to take, if there's been an employee who's been let's just take an example of embezzling, or there's some extreme example where an employee has acted in some way that requires an immediate dismissal, then if you have, whether it's a 3-member or a 5-member board, if you can't reach somebody right away and it's a consult
Well,
requirement,
first of
then
all-
you might not, the town administrator might not be able to reach all of the selectmen. So that's why that committee changed it. I thought we were I guess we're kind of reopening this, because
The other thing
I
you gotta
think we thought that
consider, too.
2C was in final form, but if we want to reopen it,
Well,
we'll have to
first
talk
of all,
about it Monday night with the warrant committee.
The other thing you got to consider, and I suppose it may not always be like this, but right now, virtually every department, not every, but virtually every department head is part of a collective bargaining agreement. There is due
True.
process. I mean, the town administrator can't fire them without a due process.
We had to follow you'd have to follow what's bargained for in
So-
the agreements. Or if it's a department head, some of them have contracts, so the contract might specify what the process there is and what the grounds are.
I don't think they, no, it's still a union, in terms of the due process, it's still a union contract. It's just that by the end of their contract, if they do have a contract, you cannot appoint, you have the ability not to appoint them again. But that's all you have.
But if someone has a contract, they're not in the union, isn't that?
Yeah, no, they still are.
No, they're separate
Like the
employment
police chief,
agreements.
the
Well, their
chief,
employment
police
agreement,
chief,
they're not really,
fire chief.
yeah, I mean,
Well,
Employment
the
agreements.
agreements,
They're not in the
there are
union.
employment agreements for quite a few of the department heads.
Department heads are in the managers union, and
Right,
have
but
a
they still
two-year
have those
appoint-
appointments.
They have a 2-year appointment.
Right, and at the end of that
2 years.
appointment, you
You
can,
can
for,
just not
Not renew it.
appoint.
right, you can not reappoint.
okay. Do any of the employment agreements have, they must have provisions in there for termination, because most employments in the private sector do. I would think they do.
Separate employment agreements for your police chief, your fire chief, your deputy chief.
But, yeah, those are
They all have
full-blown
separate-
contracts, and they're not union.
Right, so
But the ones in the union have the
the collective bargaining
bargaining agreement
yeah.
behind them. So the only termination before the end of their appointment period would be for cause, and then you'd probably have to go through the union process of hearing and the whole bit.
I get that, but I'm uncomfortable with the fact that we could come in some night to a meeting and find that our fire chief has been eliminated. And we don't have any say in it.
Well, but keep in mind what Colleen Corona said when she was here, that the town administrator, if the goal here is to get the Board of Selectmen acting more as the Board of Directors and not being involved with a lot of the hiring and the day-to-day decisions, then the town administrator serves at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen. So the town administrator is going to know that if that person starts taking arbitrary action to just terminate employees for no reason,
Understood,
then
yeah.
the Board of Selectmen is
That
going to
town
be
administrator's
terminating the
gonna be
town
gone, yeah.
administrator.
I get that, but by that point, the fire chief is gone or the police chief is gone, you know? I would rather see that not just the chairman, but the whole Board of Selectmen should weigh in on this, if anybody is going to get
Well, I guess nobody's weighing in on it, that's the problem.
But they're gonna be
It's
informed, Tom.
Informed. I guess you could say the whole board should be informed, perhaps.
We can bring that issue up Monday night. I think,
But
I think the only
informed
issue
doesn't
there-
contemplate a discussion.
that's right.
It's just
It's
informed.
notice. It's notice that I've taken this action. And, one of the reasons to go to the 5-member board is to have more discussion among members of the board where you don't have an open meeting law issue. So Colleen Corona, when she was from East, the selectman from the town of Easton, when she was here, she said that when she was the chair, and whoever's the chair, is usually the one who has communication with the town administrator and then reports it out to the members of the board. That may not be something that Milton wants to do. I have a feeling that members of the Board of Selectmen in Milton are going to want to have direct access to the town administrator. I would. I'm guessing all of us would. So the idea was that it's a notice to the chair, and then the chair would notify the board so that the town administrator wouldn't be prevented from taking an immediate action in a rare circumstance of a situation that needs to be addressed. I mean, I'm just reporting.
I get it.
This is the government
Yeah.
study.
I mean, we can
issue.
talk about it Monday night anyway, at the warrant committee.
We can. I think the government study committee will be surprised if we're reopen. I think they thought we were kind of in agreement on areas where we're not making changes. But if we want to reopen something, I guess that's our right to do that. The idea here is the warrant committee is looking for something that's in pretty close to final form from our point of view, knowing that they might have a lot of changes to it, and then town meeting might have a lot of changes.
Would inform the whole board, would that be better? Again, call it inform, so.
Yeah, inform the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, why don't I let Rick know about that. His committee's going to be meeting at 7 o'clock on Monday night. Warrant committee's at 7:30, so they're planning to discuss this a little bit earlier. I can alert him to the fact that that's, do we want to take a vote on that? What's the consensus?
I mean, I have no problem with inform the Board of Selectmen. I mean, it's a phone call, but.
Yeah, I don't either. So if we want to make that the full board, then why don't we say that that's our board's view?
Yeah.
And we'll see what the government study committee thinks. Okay, so if we can just go back to John Flynn's other changes. So in section 2, he's just moving the first clause, notwithstanding, he's changing that to the second paragraph. He's changing in 2B the word dismissal to removal. The only other issue that we had asked him to take a look at was section 2U, like umbrella. This is the section in which an N-Star or a National Grid utility grant of location would be delegated to the town administrator, so that rather than the board having those N-Star hearings, the town administrator would preside over those hearings. And town council's advice was that it's permissible to delegate that, but there has to be a procedure in
This is
place
a
that the
public
town
hearing.
administrator would
As a
follow.
public
So
hearing.
he's written just in accordance with the procedure established for the Board of Selectmen. He thinks that that's sufficient. The main change really was just the temporary appointment in section 5.
Yep.
Personnel Board has looked at this and had a couple of comments, but I don't think town council made any changes in response. One of their comments was that in section 1, they were concerned with the language allowing the board to enter into a contract not more than 3 years in length with the town administrator, and their concern was just that that might be interpreted to mean that the town administrator couldn't serve for more than 3 years. But town council doesn't believe that that's the right interpretation, that it just allows for the contract to be no more than that long, but the person could be reappointed at the board's discretion. I think that was their primary comment. So, other than reporting this change in section 2C to the Government Study Committee, do we have any other comments
I'm fine with the rest.
or changes?
Fine,
All right, then, do we want to take a vote, other than, well, I guess in this version, we're changing this language in section 2C to the, taking out the words chairperson of the, do we want to have a motion to
I'll
approve
make a
this
motion
form?
to approve the wording, or the content of Article 15, Town Administrator Article, subject to the one change that we made.
Second.
Any discussion? Then all in favor?
All right?
Aye, unanimous. So we'll meet with the warrant committee on Monday night about this. I guess we'll probably all be there, and the government study committee will be there. And I should probably just emphasize one thing that Rick and I talked about, which is that every time one of our two boards or committees meets, we wind up having more changes. And I thought Rick made a good point, which is that this recommendation, assuming the warrant committee adopts it without making too many changes, this is already a big change. We're transferring the authority to hire, Rick's estimation was 100, and I think we want to verify that before town meeting, that, you know, you're talking 50 or so police officers, you add in all the town departments, where this is a big change, and we have pretty broad consensus. If everyone were writing their own version of this, we'd probably all come up with some different version. But we have pretty broad agreement, and the concern is that if we wind up, because it's happening on their committee too, if we wind up wordsmithing too many sections of this, we're never going to be finished with it. Right. So at some point, we have to say to the warrant committee, here's where we're at. The two boards, we don't all agree on it, but we don't all agree on every wording provision in it, but we agree on the broad concept that it's moving the town in the right direction, and it's transferring a lot of day-to-day authority to the town administrator. So we'll see where the warrant committee goes.
While you say 100...
We might come out of that with some more changes to this.
Well, while you say 100, when you think about the police, the civil service, and there's really not much discretion. I mean, there's a little bit of discretion, but very, very little. And
but still, the board's hiring them, so it's...
Technically.
Yeah, but but at least you're moving the authority there
Right.
to the town administrator.
But it's such a rigid appointment because of civil service laws that there is a little bit of discretion to bypass somebody, but other than that, there's not much discretion in who you hire.
Yeah, true. I guess the point is it's not coming to this board for an action
Right,
on
that's
an
all.
agenda item. Okay, so we took a vote on that. We voted that, right? Okay. We are now on to, we have items 10 and 11 relate to each other. We have, in item 10, this is a proposal to reopen and close the May 2015 annual town meeting warrant if we want to remove the Swift Hat Shop articles, which are 49 and 50. They're the last two articles that are in the warrant. Number 11 relates to the appointment of a committee, and we currently have 6 people who are, including Linda Weld, who was here earlier, who are willing to serve on the Preservation Committee. Should we take number 11 first? I think it might be better to take these out of order so we can talk about the committee and then make a decision as to what we want to do with the articles. So number 11,
I'll make a motion to appoint the...
you have the revised motion.
Yeah, I know. The
Okay.
the following residents to the Swift Hat Shop Preservation Committee to serve through March of 2016: Edward E. Wendell, Linda Weld, April Lamoureux, Mary Noble, Peter Jeffries, and Ned Corcoran.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, now this is 6 people. The charge refers to 9 people. And we're still, the idea here is to try to at least get some people appointed to this committee tonight and possibly appoint the remaining members at the next meeting, which is on March 24th. I know we've still been reaching out to people. Some of these people have been recommended by either Steve O'Donnell, the chair of our Historical Commission, and Ted Wendell and Linda Weld are both members of the Historical Commission. The charge does say that 2 members would be appointed by the Historical Commission. John Cronin, our former town administrator, suggested a number of people, including some of these appointees, as well as some people that we've talked with who are not able to serve for a variety of reasons. But we have 6 out of the 9 tonight, and if anyone has more names to recommend or has reached out to anyone, and if we could get them on the next agenda, we could get the full committee appointed. The charge had mentioned we'd like to have people with a background in architecture or real estate, planning, development, fundraising. All of these people bring some aspect of that to the committee. And I think we have some pretty good candidates here.
Yeah, fine with it.
So shall we appoint these tonight? We've made a motion, it's been seconded. Any discussion? Then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so back to number 10. We've put on the agenda an opportunity to reopen and close the warrant, to remove the articles. I know we all
Much as it
would
pains
like to
me.
see this move forward more quickly than maybe it has been, but as we talked about at a prior meeting, if articles
Still too
really
many
aren't ready
questions.
for town meeting,
There's
then
still too many questions.
it's better not to have them sent back for further study, or worse, to have them voted down. So it probably would make sense, I think, to remove them and to let the committee do its work and see whether they're ready to submit something for October or possibly later, but maybe October would be
I would like
a
to
good
see
time.
something for October, because I mean, the longer we wait, but if we're going to do it, it means that, you know, as a board, as you know, we have to stay on top of it. Town administrator, everybody's got to keep this, you know, not on the back burner, but to keep it up in the forefront. Otherwise, it just gets forgotten about, and that building's going to fall down before we ever do anything about it.
I'll move to reopen the 2015 annual town meeting warrant, remove Articles 49 and 50, and close the warrant.
Second.
Do we have any discussion on the motion? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. All right, moving along, but we'll notify the warrant committee that those have been removed. Moving on to number 12, we have 3 different appointments to be made.
Okay, I'll move to reappoint Walter Buddy McDermott and Paul Hopkins to the Radio Amateur Communication Emergency Services Races Committee to serve through March 2016.
Second.
I've got to admit, this is a committee I've never heard of.
No, the next one as well.
Paula Rizzi can tell you what they are.
Second.
Ham radio, Paula, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what I figured it was.
All in
They
favor?
still- Aye.
Aye.
Move to,
At least they're not CBs.
We actually do a presentation every year on the gazebo, a 24-hour presentation.
Do they really?
Yes, in June. So you might want to tune in this year.
move to appoint Michael Blanchard as the privacy officer for the town
Second.
to serve through March 2016.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
What is a privacy officer?
It's
Health insurance purposes.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, I'll move to appoint Branch Lane as the tree warden for the town to serve through March 2016.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you to all of them for serving. We now have an appointment for a senior administrative clerk in the Council on Aging.
To approve the appointment of Patricia Kelly to the position of Senior Administrative Clerk at the Council on Aging, contingent upon approval by the Personnel Board.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations to Patricia on her new posting. The next item on our agenda is a release of our executive session minutes for January 21st. We have a revised motion on that one as well.
Okay, yeah.
We have one item that we have to withhold from those minutes.
I'll move to release to the public the January 21st, 2015 executive session meeting minutes, withholding item number 2.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That item, the release of the executive session minutes, relates to our next item, which is the Chapter 40B, the determination of the 1.5% land area. And this, so our minutes address, the minutes we've just released from executive session relate to a discussion we had in executive session that evening on the appeal, the decision whether to appeal from the Department of Housing and Community Development's denial of the town's attempt made last fall to have a certification that essentially, in kind of plain English, would exempt us from a 40B. And a little bit of background on this, and Mr. Clark is here in the room. He was involved quite a bit in this. And so we'll have a discussion about what we voted in executive session, but just by way of background, for people who are watching, this has been a little bit unusual in that the discussions on an appeal took place in executive session twice at the Board of Appeals and once at this board. And because of that, there hasn't been a public discussion. So there's been some misinformation that's out there. And we had a resident come in at Citizen Speak a couple of weeks ago, make reference at Citizen Speak to the board's action in executive session. And we need to just clarify really what the issue that was before us was and what the procedure leading up to that was. So the 1.5%, right before Thanksgiving, right after the filing of the 40B proposal for the Randolph Ave development, an abutters attorney raised this issue that the town might be at 1.5%, meaning 1.5% of our eligible land. And there's a large statutory definition for what that is and what's excluded and what's included. That if 1.5% of Milton's land had on it eligible units, meaning units that are on our subsidized housing inventory, which is a special list. It's not just any house in which someone at a certain income might be. It has to be housing that's been certified to be on that list. And it's the Department of Housing and Community Development, which is a state agency that makes that determination. And we have a list, that's the list that tells us we're at 4.4% right now in terms of affordable housing in Milton.
4.4% of the total housing stock.
Of the total housing stock, that's right. And an alternative test to the 10, everybody knows the 10% test, which is if the town has 10% of its housing be affordable housing stock, then we can, the Board of Appeals is authorized to be able to deny a comprehensive permit application. So we know we're far away from the 10%, we're only at 4.4%. There's an alternative test, which is if 1.5% of certain land, it's not all land, there are some areas that are excluded, buildable land. If 1.5% of that land is occupied by these types of housing units that are affordable housing, then that's an alternative means for the town to satisfy its housing obligations.
And that's
so
a test by acreage.
Yes.
And what?
By acreage.
Yeah.
So 1.5% of our acreage. So the question was presented shortly before Thanksgiving, right around the time that the 40B for Randolph Ave had been filed with the Board of Appeals, not with us. The planning director, together with our GIS person who works out of the Department of Public Works, spent an awful lot of time, but it was a short period of time, but spent a lot of their days looking at, going through the maps, trying to figure out, are we at the 1.5%? And with our 40B consultant, Kathleen O'Donnell, who's been the attorney representing the Selectmen, their belief at the time was that we were above 1.5%. And we were at the Board of Appeals meeting in early December on the 40B hearing, the issue was raised, and evidence was presented, well, I guess maybe not evidence, but maybe that's not quite the right word, but we presented information to the Board of Appeals suggesting that we were above the 1.5% as a town, and that we thought the exemption should apply to us, and we should seek the certification. There's a short time frame in which that can be raised. It can only be within 15 days of the hearing being opened. So the Board of Appeals had a short window of time to decide this. They, based on the information we submitted, they submitted the request to the state. In pretty short order, the state denied our request. When I say our, it's the Board of Appeals request. So the state denied it, and the question in early January was, should the town file an appeal to the next level, which is the Housing Appeals Committee?
And that decision really rests with the Board of Appeals.
Yes, that's right. So that's a Board of Appeals decision because they're the only ones with the standing to raise the issue in the first place, which they did, based on information that Bill and Kathleen and Alan Bishop had provided, and we had agreed with should be presented. So the Board of Appeals was presented with the question of should an appeal be filed. The Board of Appeals had a meeting in executive session with Town Council, John Flynn. I don't know who else was there, possibly one of his colleagues. The Town Council then requested a meeting with us, which we had on January 21st in executive session. And what he reported to us in executive session was that the Board of Appeals unanimously opposed filing an appeal because of the calculation that Town Council provided to them, which showed that our housing stock was not above 1.5%. It was 0.77%. And the information we had from Town Council was Milton would need 66.77 acres, so roughly 67 acres, in order to satisfy this 1.5% test. We were only at 34 acres, according to Town Council's research. And he had spent, and colleagues of his had spent, a significant amount of time looking at this. They had more time than we initially did to look at it. So there's a greater period of time to do the research in January than there was during a compressed period around Thanksgiving. The planning director and Kathleen O'Donnell met with the Town Council's office to go over the calculations. And what Town Council reported to us was the reason he was meeting with us in January was because the Board of Appeals, again, said they were unanimously opposed to filing an appeal based on his finding that the